Dr. Sams, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, the first question I have for you is, when did you start your first official day on the job?
I believe the date was January 11th, a little over a month ago.
And how do you enjoy your new role so far as president of SUNY Old Westbury?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people ask me that. Some part of it doesn't feel real. And I think that part of that doesn't feel real for me really is a function of what you pointed out a few moments ago, and that is the peculiar era that we're in as a result of COVID. But to answer your question directly, I'm enjoying it immensely. What I set out to do in the first, if you will, 3 months of my time as president is to sit back and listen and to learn what the environment has to tell me, what people have to share with me, the things I need to understand about the place. Not just the immediate kinds of things, but the things that we believe are part of an important legacy that shapes our character and personality as a college today. So I've been doing that. And that has been, I will have to admit, more enjoyable than I anticipated. Just to give you one sense of how that's been playing out. Early on, I formed the transition team. The transition team sought to cut across all areas of the campus, from faculty to students and within the staff ranks, and looking at the various areas that staff occupy. And to have this transition team to sit with me 3 different times for 90 minutes each, and to have a focused, direct conversation around 6 topics that we selected. That was immensely helpful. Yesterday was the final meeting, and I can tell you assuredly, not only did it work wonders for me in terms of orienting myself to the campus, I think it helped those members of the transition team to see what kind of president they have and the kind of president I plan to be.
Did you always know that you wanted to become a college president? And now that you have arrived, how does it feel?
Well, that's a great question. No, I never had any ambitions of being a college president, probably until around the year 2000, maybe around 2000, 2008. Maybe a little earlier than it, but certainly around that period. I went to undergrad to be a pediatrician or a gynecologist. I was interested in medicine for social justice reasons. I've always felt as though children don't get enough attention within the medical field. And likewise, women don't get enough attention. And I did not at that time feel as though we took some of the unique kinds of challenges that women face medically seriously enough as an industry. But it was while in undergrad. I feel like I was discouraged from being a doctor or even pursuing science as a biochemistry major. At the time, I felt like I had the chops. But again, I didn't think that I had the kind of support that I needed to be successful. I switched my major to history sociology because I felt like I was pretty strong in those areas and I had a passion for it. Graduated with that major, went on and got a graduate degree, and had to settle, or not, pardon me, not settle, but had to rethink my trajectory. Upon reflection of my experience at the undergraduate level, I realized that the kind of experience that I had as an undergrad, coupled with the fact that I was an HEOP student, an upper bound student, and my first job was, or when I cut my teeth, was as an HEOP counselor and coordinator of minority student services, I began to realize that if I were to do anything, it would be to, within those realms, around supporting students, to ensure that they didn't have the same kind of experience that I had had in my undergraduate experience. And that translates to diversity and student success. And so that's when I changed into student affairs. About 20 years later, I began to find myself at the vice presidency role. And that's when presidents and mentors who were presidents began to say, you should be a college president. And that's when I began to take the possibility seriously.
So you interviewed for this position during COVID-19. How daunting was that, knowing that if you got this job,
Mm.
there was no playbook at all on how to deal with a crisis like this? Did it make the interview process more stressful?
I think yes and no. The first part of your question, and I realize I didn't answer the last part of your question, which was how does it feel? It actually has felt great being here. So I'll just to make sure I answer that part of your last question. Um, I think it's been both good and bad in all actuality. The challenging part has been, and believe it or not, I took the job without ever having visited the campus. That's an unsettling feeling. Not only just me, but for my family, my wife, my son, my daughter. We accepted the opportunity, sight unseen, so to speak. I think that is part of the challenge. But it was the case all last year for anybody who was seeking any position that chances are you would not be able to see the campus and be asked to accept the position. So I wasn't unique in that way, even for presidential candidates. And so I just took that as a given, and as you point out, as a function of COVID. But I think the other thing that COVID has done is really, as a presidential candidate, enable us to see the real core elements of an institution. COVID has not only kind of stripped back the veneer across our country that has exposed our major fissures socially. You know, and we often talk about it, or at least I often talk about it in terms of the four-legged stool. American society has been highlighted as a function of COVID. One, inequities in health. Secondly, economic disparities. Third, sustainability and the impact upon the environment and our lack of readiness for a climate that's out of control. And then fourth, social injustice, particularly as kind of framed by the Black Lives Matter movement. All of those four elements have played out and to help us understand what the challenges are on our college campuses. And so, in the way that the last year has made it much more commonplace and to some degree expected that we, if we're in any form of serious discourse, would talk about these four items, right? If you fail to talk about those four items over the course of the last year and even going into this year, then you would be viewed as having missed the boat, so to speak. In a candidacy where one would traditionally be a little concerned about whether or not I can go down that road, about the degree to which we're committed to our student and the kind of roadblocks to their success as a function of income, as a function of race, as a function of gender, as a function of orientation, as a function of the multiple ways in which background are shaped. You're expected to ask those questions, right? Likewise, because we're in an era where people have gained a little muscle in their ability to talk about these things, I feel like I'm able to get a more candid answer from the campus when I ask it. Finally, in terms of when you come to SUNY, you not only interview to be the campus president, you interview to be part of the SUNY family more broadly, right? I can ask those very same questions around their commitment to diversity, around their support for a campus who some have argued could have benefited from a little bit more support from the SUNY system. I can ask those in those moments and feel like I'm getting a truer sense of what I'm walking into.
Has there been anything in your prior 29 years in higher education that may have prepared you for a time like this?
Hmm. I think the answer is when you work in diversity, it's a high risk area. When I started in diversity, that was certainly 25 years ago. The general expectation of those who worked in the field, and we didn't have these CDOs, which are these chief diversity officers. The highest level at that time was directors of multicultural affairs, right, in essence. And that's what I did, coordinator of minority student services. In essence, what we were being asked to do was to take care of Black and Brown students and to make sure that they don't rebel. That's in essence what we were seeking to do. What we thought of ourselves as doing was ensuring that they graduate, right? And we felt clear about that at those times. But now, in that time, But now when we look at diversity today and VPSA assignments, and that's Vice President for Student Affairs, we really look at high risk areas on the campus. We look at volatile areas. We look at areas that function as flashpoints on college campuses. And our ability to manage that, multiple constituencies, while making sure that the best interests of the institution is kept in focus becomes, I think, fertile ground for preparing a president. It is, if you think about it, when you are a vice president for student affairs, in which I had been for maybe 10, 11 years, when you're in that area, you're always dealing with conflict. You're always dealing with people who are not happy, students who you cannot control. They're young adults, right? They have rights, and you try to frame them around student codes of conduct. You try to frame them around honor codes. You try to frame them around expectations and threats of sanctions, right? But fundamentally, students do what they want to do, right? That is an area that is highly unsettled, an area where every day there's a tremendous potential for a high risk incident, ranging from students with poor health care, mental health kinds of concerns, not enough food, transportation concerns, homelessness, students who don't have enough aid to pay for their school, right? Those are the real issues that students face. Those are some of the real issues our students face here at OW. So when I reflect upon that 30-year experience, I am certain that particularly the areas of crisis and as a matter of my job assignment, continuously having to deal with them has prepared me fairly well for Old Westbury. That is not to say that I expect us to have a lot of crises. That is to say that because I know that there are crises, as a president, I intend to be very proactive so that they don't rise to levels of crisis.
What is your own educational philosophy and how do you apply it to your position as a president?
So it's very fair to say that my educational philosophy is very personal. My biography has strongly influenced the way in which I think about education, coming from a situation where we didn't have a whole lot of money. We had a whole lot of expectation, a whole lot of love, a whole lot of discipline. So I was guided very well by my grandparents, having been raised by my grandparents. That's central to the way in which I approach education. My grandmother, having been a pre-K teacher's assistant, really placed high expectations upon me and all of her grandkids and kids as well with regard to education. We were led to believe and understand that education was a vehicle for changing our trajectory in life, that there was a choice that sat before us in terms of where we wanted to be in life, and the vehicle to get there would be education and how we pull and push on that educational lever. That really, in essence, is how I think about education. That means that I think for every student who comes on campus, they pay a premium. They pay amounts of money that many of our students have never managed in their lives, right? When you think about the fact that in a 4-year period, a student comes from very little means, right, and plops down for a college campus about $100,000, and they ask that college change my life, affect my trajectory, build my agency, build my skill set, right? Build my sense of brilliance, my ability to tackle the world with facility, right? That's what in essence happens. That I consider to be transformation, right? That a student asks for that transformation. We at Oak Westbury and at every college have to understand that that is the fundamental value proposition that students bring to us, that they want their lives to be better as a function of the education they receive and the lives of their loved ones as a function of their connection to their families and extended relationships. That's how I see it, transformation. A student comes and asks us to transform their lives, to impact their lives, to firm up their possibilities, and to just live their best lives out as a result of what we provide. That as a notion sits centrally. You do that by granting them access, by saying to them, I'm going to give you that chance. I believe in you. I support you. And by George, we're going to make sure that you get what you are paying for. Secondly, the vehicle to doing that is excellence. The best thing we can do for every student on our campus is to make sure they graduate with a strong sense of what excellence is about and that they are steeped in bringing that about in terms of how they do their work. Thirdly, make an impact. To whom much is given, much is expected, much is required. Yes, you pay us, but what we have given you is a passport to a very bright future. We expect, especially here at Old Westbury, that you turn around and reach back and give that same passport to somebody else. And furthermore, that the brand of brilliance that we give you gives you the ability to think critically across the human landscape, across this world, and wherever something is wrong, you fix it. That's how I see education. I'll stop there.
You're still in your first 100 days as president. Have you been able to implement any of your plans? If so, what have been your priorities right now, or what has been your priorities?
I think there's one or two things that I can point to. Having been here, I think this is the start of my 6th week. So, as I said, really by intent, what I really want to do is be seen as someone who took the place seriously enough to listen to folks, to not come in here and to pretend I know the place because I don't, but to come in here and to demonstrate my respect for the place by saying, tell me about Old Westbury, and to set up opportunities where we're constantly doing that. I spoke to the transition team, and that has worked very well. I have met with multiple constituency groups, all the way from college council to student groups, SGA, to collections of our faculty. And I walk around the campus speaking to folks, and it seems odd to folks that I would stop them and engage them in a conversation. But all of this is an effort to really listen to people, to stop into their office and say, tell me about the place. Tell me about you. Tell me about the work that you're doing. I think one of the things that I'll offer up that signals part of what's important to me. I'll say it this way. I don't know how I can be committed to social justice if I'm not conscientious about the table we sit or we create, or the table we set for the college along the lines of leadership. For me, if we believe in ideas of shared governance, if we believe in transparency, and for me, I think it's insulting to have a collection of brilliant people and not say, help me, or we collectively lead the institution. And so at the cabinet level, we have invited faculty to be at the cabinet level in the form of the deans of the schools, as well as the chair of faculty senate. Why is that important? The cabinet is where the institution is led. It is the real hub of administrative wheel of horsepower for the institution. And because academic excellence is our calling card, you have to make sure that you have academics at that table. But that's just the beginning of what I think people can expect to see. But we're going to, from top to bottom, think about where decisions about the institution are made and make sure that we have representation across the board. And that definitely includes students.
What is your assessment on our current remote learning instruction?
Mhm. So I came from a campus at Prairie View A&M University. It had a different mix of learning platforms. At the time at which I left, we were looking at about 40% in classroom instruction. Some of that includes some hybrid design. And then obviously the remaining would be remote, whether synchronous or asynchronous instruction, which means that there are far more students on campus. All of the residential beds, of which there are approximately 5,500 on that campus, were occupied. So students were moving about amidst COVID, right? And all these kinds of efforts were afoot to make sure that we were mitigating risk as much as possible based on our learning from a day-to-day standpoint. Then as I come here, we had moved the lion's share of instruction online, something radically different. We had not opened the Woodlands, allowing students to be in residence on campus. So a very different design was taking place here. So admittedly, it was much simpler for me in terms of coming here. Whereas there, particularly as Vice President for Student Affairs, every day something came out within the residential facility. Rates of COVID were higher than certainly what we're talking about here. Over the past week, I think we've seen 4 folks on campus here on campus the past couple of weeks on campus, or excuse me, 5 weeks, 4 on campus and 8 who called in who were not even on campus. And any given day at Prairie View, I was looking at 25, 30 students calling in, faculty calling in saying that they have COVID. This is very, very different. But to directly answer your question, it's been much simpler from that standpoint. And what I think we have to think about is the fact that when I hear what students are saying and hear what faculty are saying, there's no real consensus. We have students who want to be back in the residence facility. We have students who want to be in the formal classroom. We have faculty who want to be in the classroom safely. Everyone wants it to happen safely. And we have faculty who are concerned for their health. Those are the real thickets that we have to move through as we approach the fall semester. So it really, at this point, is all over the place.
Since you mentioned about some students who want to be back on campus as well as staff, and some students and staff are concerned about their health, my next question goes to you. Well, as a president, like, how do you ease the nerves of
Mm,
of the people who are concerned
yeah,
about their health? If it was the case of SUNY Westbury students and staff are going back to the campus fully, let's just say for an example in the fall.
right. You do that by building a plan that is inclusive, that makes sure that those concerns are taken into an account from the various segments of our campus community. You make sure that, again, as you set that table around the building of that plan, that you have the representatives from those various constituents building that plan for fall return, if you will. And then you manage it through transparency. You don't make sure that there are no surprises, that you put it out early enough for people to work with, wrestle with, and understand this as an expectation, enabling them to take personal responsibility for those elements that are part of their responsibility, and to say, well, I don't know if that part is going to work because of this, and making the adjustment. So, one, as you plan, you make sure that the folks for whom the plan has to affect are there crafting the plan. Secondly, you make sure that there's a transparent process and vetting process and not a telling process. What I mean by a vetting process versus a telling, we want to make sure that people see it early and say, I'm worried about this piece, as opposed to telling the campus community that this is what you're going to do.
What do you think are the odds for students to maybe be fully back on campus? And what about dorming?
I don't feel comfortable saying the odds, because that would mean I would have some sense of the trajectory of COVID, right? Because the whole plan is predicated upon a certain condition around the spread of the virus, the rate at which people have gotten vaccinated, the rate at which COVID is showing up on our campus in the immediate area. There are a number of factors that go in ultimately making a decision around not only presence, but the degree of presence, right? We may make a determination that the situation is such that half of the students would occupy the residence rather than all students or all beds being filled. We got to make sure that we have spaces on campus for students in the event that someone gets the virus, that we can pull them out of or from around everyone else so there's no transmission, and at the same time take care of them. That points to our capacity. What is our capacity for supporting students who may get sick? What is our capacity for feeding, for transporting, for monitoring, managing? All those things are part of the plan. Then I think the other piece is the density within the classroom. I feel comfortable in believing that we will still have remote instruction, right, to some degree. Not everyone's going to be able to come back. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable in coming back. And furthermore, because we don't have an infinite amount of classroom space, we know that we're going to have to manage the density of our class experience and laboratory experience to the tune of maybe a half or even smaller than that, than, in terms of the number of students who can sit in a classroom. But those are the factors we have to consider. Those are the things we have to weigh. But at this time, I don't know if I feel comfortable making such a prediction.
SUNY Old Westbury is very well known for its diversity. So, in normal times, it's been a good thing. But during the times of the pandemic, it has disproportionately
Yes, sir.
affected minorities of color, particularly Black and Brown students. How can we address those needs?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a number of things. We one know that the federal government has enabled a number of campuses, and we're no exception, to help students to manage through this period and to help colleges to support their students through this period in the form of the CARES Act, the CRISA Act, MSI Act. All of those funds that have come in have fundamentally been designed to enable us to help students to continue their work on securing their degree. So that is a major play. That is a major piece of the equation that we must utilize to make sure that students are supported. Some schools have given students funding. We've done that as well. Some schools have enabled students in the form of emergency response unit. We've done that as well here at Old Westbury. Some schools have rightfully used the funds to improve their facilities, to make sure that they're bringing enhancing filtration, making sure that there's PPP, making sure that they're sanitizing and cleaning the spaces with greater frequency, making sure that they're expanding the spaces and managing the spaces to reduce the possibility of contact, making sure that they're rating the spaces. There are all these kinds of things that are designed to keep people healthy. But what I think you're talking about is the fact that, again, going back to that four-legged stool that I mentioned before, this has really put a great emphasis on financial insecurities, right? Economic challenges that many of our students face. One of the things I think is helpful is that we keep in mind the need to stay flexible. That flexibility enables students to really think about the best way for them to continue to grab and harness their education during these challenging times. It will not benefit students if we, firm up and we make a statement that you must do this, that in order to stay viable, in order to be here this fall and going forward, you have to be on campus. That flexibility and making sure that students have that support is going to be really important to our ability to help the diverse realities that our students explain. What's going to also be important, Brianna, is for our students to voice their needs. We're not going to be able to assess every student's need. Students should feel very comfortable in saying, I need thus and so. It's our responsibility to, within the best of our possibilities, to meet those needs. But we really are going to need students to speak up and to tell us what their needs are.
Do you think that this year students who are graduating in the class of 2021 should they expect a little bit more of a virtual graduation, or do you think that it will still remain the same like how it was last year?
Our intent is to have a hybrid, to have some element of it to be in person. Certainly, we will not be able to have the whole campus, collected together, brought together. That's not going to happen. But recognizing that students do want something that allows them to be present, to have that culminating event. That, that's why they're here, right? And they've always had dreams about how it should look. We're cognizant of that, and we're actively thinking about how we can keep that safe environment. It is the undertone of everything we're trying to do, to try to give students as much as we possibly can, the things that they would like to have happen in a safe manner. And so to answer your question, they should expect that it will be hybrid. It won't be the full-throated, everyone walking across and all family members up there and they can rush the stage and take pictures. I think we all know that that's not possible, but we are trying very hard to give them some semblance of a present, in-person kind of experience. Yes, ma'am.
What are some of the challenges that do you think SUNY Old Westbury is facing right now or is facing right
I'll
now?
speak to just two. The first, I think it's very, very obvious. We could benefit from more money. We are a community because of our principles that are gestated within our mission. We have high ideals. In spite of the fact that we're about social justice, and that includes equity, income justice, right? We need money in order to realize our aspirations as an institution. So that's the first and obvious. The second is, and I've said this a couple of times, I don't know if it's good enough for us to say that we are a best kept secret. We are a hidden gem. I think a great many people need to know about the brilliance of the place, about the principles of the place, about the value of the place, about the quality of the education that we give our students. Last night, I was on a Zoom that was sponsored by SGA. It focused on Black male graduates and what they're doing around the world and what they took away from their experience while here at Old Westbury. And they were crystal clear when asked, what was the best thing that happened for you here at Old Westbury? Every single one of them went immediately to their experience with faculty, the quality of their education, and the way in which they were prepared for all the challenges that they have faced over the last 10, 15, 20 years as graduates of Old Westbury. We need people to understand that as part of our brand. As it relates to brand, people need to know who we are, what we're about, the quality of our experience, and that needs to be as familiar with folks in the immediate region, and I would say throughout the Northeast. We aspire to something that a great many schools do not, but we need to be a little less humble about it and be willing to step out and be forceful about how important our mission is. So those are the two things that stand out for me. We need more money. We need more funds. We need more scholarship for our students. We do not want to say a student had to stop out because she did not have enough money to graduate. That's not what we want to be about. And then secondly, we need to elevate our brand. Everybody needs to know who we are, what we're about, because America needs an Old Westbury worldview in higher education.
What can Old Westbury students and staff expect under your leadership? Like, what
Mhm.
are the principles you have that you want students and staff to know?
Well, I don't think I have principles that we haven't had for 50 some odd years. The principles that are in our missions are squarely aligned with my principles. If there's ever a place I feel like I fit at, it's this place. I think that's the first thing I feel compelled to say. I think inclusion. I don't mean inclusion just around diversity, in spite of the fact that I feel like I've staked out a pretty good career around principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. But I mean inclusion, meaning that we are a community that contributes to the trajectory of our college. That I want students to understand what leadership is about by virtue of the way in which their lives are allowed and asked to play throughout the vitality of our community, right? I don't want students to come here and to get an education. I want them to create an educational experience for themselves and for us as well. I do have high expectation as a leader, but I don't know how you can be committed to excellence without high expectations. So I think it's fair as a president that I hold all of us. I will hold students to high expectation. I expect students to take their time here very seriously, to be very thoughtful about the quality of the education that they get. That nobody walks into a place, gives $100,000, and then says, well, just do whatever you will do. That's not the kind of graduate we want. Take it very seriously. Understand what you're doing. And every day, I'll ask students to do that. Likewise, I'll ask faculty to always be cognizant about the dreams that our students have and to make sure that we're empowering those dreams, that we're contouring the direction in which our students will go ultimately. And then I'll ask the staff to create an environment in which those two principles, faculty and students, and the work that they agree to come to do together, that we create an environment as administrators and staff where that kind of mix happens in ways that other campuses become envious of. We all have a role, and I believe in the importance of role. It is part of my intellectual belief set as well. We all play an integral role to the success. My job is to map that out for everybody. Students come here to be brilliant, nothing less. Faculty come to make you brilliant and to be researchers, right? And producers, nothing less. Staff and faculty come here to make sure that activity takes place. And that's what I believe.
Before we wrap up this interview, is there anything else you would like to share to us? Anything about you that you haven't shared yet that students or staff would like to know, like a fun fact? Anything?
So I think it is important that folks know that I try to be accessible. It is an important principle to me. And it's simply because, in my experience, the lack of access, I think, impeded my growth. I experienced an undergrad experience where I felt like better access would have led to a better outcome for me and better outcome for many of my colleagues in my undergraduate experience. That's important. The other thing is, while I hold high expectations, I am willing to help people to meet those expectations. I don't think it is just enough as a president to keep the bar high without ever helping people to jump over it. It's my responsibility to make sure that for everyone who has their respective high bar, that we build capacity as an institution to enable everybody to jump over it. I think thirdly, a little fun fact, and some people know that, I believe that your child's hobby becomes your hobby as a parent. And ice hockey is my favorite sport. And that surprises folks. I was pretty good at playing basketball. Probably would not have made the basketball team in undergrad and grew up playing basketball. But my work study assignment was to do the ice for our ice hockey team in my undergrad experience. And so I grew an affinity to ice hockey, but it turned out that my son is an ice hockey player. And so my hobby has become ice hockey. I absolutely love it. And people wouldn't pick that up immediately unless I said it. So I think that that's a little fun fact. I'm also a good cook, Brianna. I don't get to cook as much as I used to, but I'm a pretty good cook. That's one more. There you go.
Well, that is a wrap for our interview. Thank you so much, Dr. Sams, for joining us for the interview, and I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to meet you in person. I guess we'll still have a mask on at that point. And I will say, I am so excited to see more students on this campus so I can stop feeling like I'm stalking the 5 or 6 who I see. I really just can't wait to see more students on our campus safely, of course, but it is certainly not the same when so many of our students are not just moving and bustling about on our campus. Thank you for this interview, and I hope you have an outstanding rest of your spring semester.